Welcome to Eternal Dread, where fear never sleeps. Tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is, because terror has no limits. If you're brave enough, share and comment, but beware, something might be watching you too. Now, turn off the lights, and let the dread begin. Have you ever heard something you weren't supposed to? I'm not talking about an overheard whisper in a darkened hallway, or a hushed conversation you accidentally eavesdropped on. No, this was different. This was something impossible, something that shouldn't exist yet. Something from the future. I did. And now, I don't think I have much time left. It started 2 nights ago. I was up late, too late, mindlessly flipping through stations on my old radio. The kind with a stiff tuning dial and a scratched-up casing. The kind you don't really see anymore. I'd found it at a garage sale months back, drawn to its nostalgic charm, and ever since, it had become my companion during long, restless nights. I'm one of those people who need background noise while working, static-filled music, late-night talk shows, even those strange, distant signals that flicker in and out of dead frequencies. But that night, something different came through. At first, it was barely a whisper beneath the crackle of empty airwaves, a thin, ghostly hum fighting to be heard. I almost ignored it, almost turned the dial again. But then, a voice came. This is an emergency alert for all residents. This is not a test. I froze. The voice wasn't like the usual robotic warnings I'd heard before. It was off, slower, almost hesitant, like it was being forced out against some invisible resistance. A deep, mechanical distortion coated every word, stretching them out unnaturally. Please listen carefully. This broadcast is coming from the future. A nervous chuckle slipped from my lips. A joke. Had to be. Some underground station, having fun with late-night listeners. Maybe a creepypasta-inspired prank, trying to get under people's skin. But then, the voice came again. If you are hearing this, you have less than 24 hours. They're already here. They are watching. A shiver ran down my spine. And then a sudden burst of static, deafening, swallowing everything. The radio hissing like a living thing before cutting off entirely. I just sat there, staring at the radio. My fingers clenched tight around the armrest of my chair, the tremble in my hands betraying the fear I didn't want to acknowledge. It had to be fake. Some weird experimental transmission. A trick, a hoax, something, anything. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, the unease crawled beneath my skin, settling deep into my bones. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 12:03 a.m. A perfectly ordinary moment in a perfectly ordinary night. And yet, nothing felt ordinary anymore. With a shaky breath, I switched the radio off, buried myself under my blankets, and squeezed my eyes shut. I forced my mind to push it away, to label it as nothing more than late-night paranoia. I was wrong. I didn't want to hear anything else. I turned everything off and headed to my room. I lay in bed. My eyelids were heavy, my body sinking into the mattress, exhaustion pulling at me like unseen hands. The strange radio broadcast from earlier still lingered in my mind, but I had almost convinced myself it was nothing, just a hoax, a trick of my overtired brain. I was just about to sleep, and then, at exactly 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A sharp, urgent vibration against my nightstand. My stomach twisted as I reached for it, dread pooling in my chest like ice-cold water. An emergency alert. But something was wrong. There was no text, no explanation, just a pulsing, red notification swallowing the screen, beating like a heart. And then, I saw the radio, sitting on the table near my bed. I didn't put it there. I knew I hadn't put it there, but it was there. And before I could even process what I was looking at, before I could breathe or think or react, it turned on, by itself. The dial didn't move. No one touched it, but the second the static cleared, the voice came through again. Clearer this time. Stronger. You ignored the first warning. A cold sensation slid down my spine, like icy fingers pressing into my skin. Do not acknowledge them. Do not answer if they knock. Do not let them in. A loud, ear-piercing screech of static ripped through the air, rattling the speakers, then silence. The room felt unbearably still. And then, knock, knock, knock. A sharp, deliberate sound. I nearly dropped my phone. The knocking had come from my front door. I live alone. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one should be here. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Knock, knock, knock. Again. It was slow, even. The kind of knocking that didn't ask for permission. but announced its presence. I forced my legs to move, each step feeling heavier than the last. My breath felt too loud in the suffocating quiet. I reached the door and pressed my eye against the peephole. Nothing. No one was there. But the knocking continued. I backed away, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. My phone buzzed again. A new message. Do not look outside. My stomach twisted. A sick feeling spread through me like something was crawling beneath my skin. I couldn't resist. I moved toward the window, inching forward like something unseen was pushing against my chest. Slowly, carefully, I pulled the blinds back just enough to peek through. And I saw a man standing. Or at least, I think it was a man. He stood on the sidewalk, directly facing my house. Perfectly still. Too still. His posture was unnatural, rigid like a mannequin. His face was turned toward me, but he wasn't looking at me. His head was tilted at an impossible angle, as if something inside his neck had snapped. He wasn't moving, but he was there, watching. My phone buzzed again. They know you see them. A breath caught in my throat. My hands went numb. I stumbled back from the window, yanking the blinds shut so hard they rattled. And then, the knocking stopped. But the silence that followed, it was worse. Much, much worse. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat in my room, back pressed against the cold wall, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath shallow and uneven. I waited. I waited for another message, another warning, another sound that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. But nothing came. Hours crawled by, stretching endlessly as the darkness outside deepened. The house was suffocatingly silent, every shadow stretching too far, every sound making me flinch. When the sun finally rose, I let out a shaky breath. The golden light seeped through my window, washing over the room like a safety net, chasing away the night's horrors. And suddenly it all felt stupid. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some underground radio stunt designed to freak people out. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, weaving fear into something bigger than it was. I told myself I was fine. I told myself it was over. But then, at exactly midnight, the radio switched on. By itself. The static was deafening, crackling like fire, growing louder and louder until it spoke. This is your final warning. My entire body locked up. The voice was different now. Heavier. Darker. They will come inside tonight. You must not run. You must not scream. You must not speak. It said. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as if something invisible was pressing down on it. My fingers curled around my bed sheets, my body frozen in place. Then, BZZZ, my phone vibrated. I swallowed, hesitating, then slowly lowered my gaze. A message. Do not let them take you. My stomach dropped. The screen flickered. Then it went completely black. At that exact moment, the lights in my house flickered. Once. Twice. Then, click. The front door unlocked by itself. A cold sweat broke out along my spine. My mouth went dry. I did not unlock that door, but it had opened. I grabbed the baseball bat leaning against my closet, clutching it so tightly my fingers ached. I didn't know if it would do anything, but I needed something. Anything. I backed into the farthest corner of my room, my entire body tensed, ears straining for any sound. Then I heard them. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. They weren't heavy, but they weren't light either. They sounded wrong, like something that wasn't entirely sure how to move properly. I clenched my jaw, biting down on the urge to scream. Then, I heard breathing. Too slow. Too deep. Like someone trying to imitate what a human should sound like. Creak. Then a slow, agonizing creak echoed through the hallway. The floorboards groaned beneath them as they moved through the house. They were looking for me. My phone buzzed again. One last message. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what it said. But I did. Do not blink. It said. I stiffened. Then, a shadow, right outside my bedroom door. I could see it, a sliver of darkness beneath the gap. It didn't move. It didn't shift. It just stood there, waiting. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my skull, blood rushing through my ears so loudly it felt like a roar. And then, it moved, towards me. Every cell in my body screamed for me to run, but I couldn't. My muscles refused to obey. And the warning, I couldn't ignore it. Do not blink. So I didn't. My eyes locked on the shadow, burning from the strain. Tears welled up, spilling down my cheeks, but I did not blink. I couldn't. And then, The lights flickered. The radio let out a final burst of static. And just like that, they were gone. The shadow disappeared. The air went still. The house was empty. I don't know what would have happened if I had blinked. But I never want to find out. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know what they were. But I know one thing. I am still here. But something has changed. The radio? It doesn't work anymore. Every station is just dead air. My phone? It doesn't receive emergency alerts anymore. But last night, I looked outside. He was there, standing across the street. The same stiff posture. The same tilted head. Waiting. Watching. I don't think this is over. And I don't think I have much time left. Ethan Caldwell had always been a simple man with a straightforward routine. Yet one chilly autumn morning, with the promise of adventure and the thrill of freedom whispering in his ear, he decided to drive cross-country. He loaded his worn-out sedan with a few essentials and set off on the open road, the sun climbing higher, illuminating the vibrant maples lining the highway. As the miles blurred into a kaleidoscope of landscapes and fleeting towns, he found himself humming to the music blaring through his speakers. The hum of the road was comforting, even peaceful. But then, as he drove through a stretch of highway so desolate that the earth seemed to stretch into infinity, his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and there it was. A twisted face, its skin stretched taut over a grotesque smile that seemed to tear the very fabric of its cheeks. Black, endless eyes locked onto his, the reflection too vivid to be dismissed as a trick of the light. The face twisted and contorted in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. No, he muttered, his hand shaking on the wheel. It's nothing. Just my imagination. He forced his eyes back to the road, trying to shake the feeling of the demon's stare burning into him. But that glance, just that one accidental glimpse, was enough to plant the seed of unease. A nervous tension began to take root in his chest. He tried to focus on the road ahead, but with every mile, his mind seemed drawn back to that mirror. He couldn't help it. Every time he caught himself glancing up, there it was, the grotesque grin widening with each second. He'd look away, but the reflection would linger in the back of his mind. His body tightened with every turn of the wheel, every mile of road, as though the thing in the mirror was inching closer to him. He'd find himself checking the rear view for no reason at all, his eyes darting up involuntarily. Every time it grinned, wider, crueler, as if mocking his every attempt to avoid it. He glanced at it again, when a truck passed on the highway. The instant his gaze flickered to the glass, he saw it. A brief flash of the creature's distorted face, its eyes impossibly dark. "Stop!" he shouted at himself, slapping the dashboard as if it would wake him from some nightmare. But the worst part was the voice. A raspy, breathless whisper, chilling in its intimacy. "I'm right here, Ethan." His blood ran cold, the whisper vibrating in the air as though it was inside the car with him. It lingered, soft and slow, echoing in the stillness of the night. Ethan slammed on the brakes, pulling off the road. The tires screeched against the pavement as he nearly lost control of the car, and he took several deep breaths, trying to steady himself. When he turned to the rear view again, the demon's face was there, grinning, closer than before. The skin around its smile was torn, its mouth wide enough to swallow the world. "Get away from me!" Ethan screamed, his voice cracking, but the creature only chuckled, a low, cruel sound that reverberated in his bones. "You can't escape me," it purred. "Every time you look back, I'll be here." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his hands slick on the steering wheel. His breath came in shallow gasps as he looked straight ahead, his eyes locked onto the road. But no matter how fast he drove, no matter how far he pushed himself, the creature was always there, lurking in the glass. Night after night, the journey stretched on, each day a blur of endless roads and fuel stops. Ethan began to notice that the creature's presence wasn't just in the rear view anymore. It was in the reflections of gas station windows, in the corner of his eyes when he glanced down at his phone. In every shiny surface, there was the glint of its smile. The lights flicker to life on a satellite orbiting Mars. The solar panels extend, and turn towards the Sunday past the satellite, you can see a ship approaching fast. As the ship rockets past the satellite, it snaps a photo. The blurry image on the side of the ship reads, "The Odyssey." Inside the ship, the crew from the Odyssey are fast asleep. The panels on the wall read "Extended Sleep Module Malfunction." The panels flash over and over as the ship's AI plays an eerie song from 1950 called "Sleepwalk." The Odyssey flies past Mars and into the void of the unknown, with no one at the controls. He stopped in one town for gas, trying to avoid eye contact with the mirror at all costs. His hands shook as he filled the tank, a sick, gnawing sense of dread creeping over him. When he turned to walk back to the car, he saw his reflection in the store window. And then for an instant, there it was again. The grin. The black eyes. It was no longer just in the mirror. It was everywhere, stalking him in every reflection, in every shiny surface. It was getting harder and harder to ignore it. Every accidental glance sent a shock of fear through his body. He couldn't outrun it. He couldn't escape. He forced himself back into the car, hands trembling on the steering wheel as he sped away, his eyes now glued to the road. He promised himself he wouldn't look again. But no matter how hard he tried, his gaze flickered toward the mirror every few moments. Each time, the demon was there, closer, its grin wider, its eyes more intense. It fed off his fear. Then, without thinking, his eyes darted to the mirror. The creature's face filled the glass. Its eyes bore into him. Its mouth was stretched impossibly wide, beyond any human shape, the edges of its smile bleeding into its skin. Ethan screamed, the sound raw and primal. He slammed the gas pedal to the floor, the car surging forward at reckless speed. But the creature's laughter filled the car, suffocating him, smothering him with its presence. He couldn't stop looking. His mind betrayed him, his body betrayed him. His hands gripped the wheel, but his eyes kept returning to the mirror, where the thing was waiting. And then, in a final, desperate moment, Ethan slammed the pedal to the floor. As he lay there, bloodied and broken, smoke swirling in the night, he heard the thing's voice one last time. He drove straight toward the solitary tree at the edge of the highway, the twisted form silhouetted against the night sky. The crash came like thunder, a violent collision of metal and bone, a world of pain that seemed to stretch on forever. Good boy," it whispered, now standing outside the wreckage. Its grin was triumphant, leering down at him. Ethan's vision blurred, but his mind was clear for a moment, clear enough to understand. There had never been an escape. The mirror, the creature, it was all a reflection of himself. The thing he had been running from, the thing that had been chasing him, was his own fear, his own darkness. He had carried it with him all along, and now it had him. The end. Written by Timothy Cox. Isolation. Usually either you die or you thrive. For me, it did something entirely different. Some people can't handle loneliness. Waking up every day alone, then doing your job alone, and then going to bed alone. Others seem perfectly fine with isolation. The ability to self-regulate and entertain oneself with books, or even just enjoying nature, seems more and more rare these days. I didn't really have a choice. Ever since I took a job as a fire watch, I've been alone. Like alone. The reason I took this job was twofold. Life seemed hell-bent on making me be alone. When I was 19, my mom passed away from a sudden heart attack. A couple years later, my dad died from a combination of a respiratory virus and heart failure. Then a year or so ago, I was involved in a head-on collision with a drunk driver. My wife Claire and son Jack were also in the car with me. They didn't make it. I gave in to the will of the universe and agreed that I should be alone. I used to play this indie video game back in the day. It was pretty popular, and it's what inspired me to take this job. The game was called Firewatch. If you haven't played it, you definitely should. After everything was taken from me, it seemed only appropriate to seclude myself like the protagonist of that game. My day typically begins with the sunrise. The tower has windows on all sides, so the light of the rising sun is pretty oppressive. I'll grab a bite to eat, usually just some buttered toast. I turn the radio up to hear what's been going on in the world without me. I snag my binoculars and do a quick 360 scan and check for signs of smoke. If I see smoke, I radio my boss and check if there's a sanctioned camper in that area. If yes, then I ignore it unless the smoke becomes too thick. If not, then I go check out the area. Usually it's just some kids who snuck out there to party. Then I read them the riot act about fire safety, tell them to get approval for their camping, and have them dispose of any illicit substances that they may or may not have with them. Then I return to the tower. Wash, rinse, and repeat. On my lunch break, I like to take a nature walk with a sandwich or something. Then I return to the tower and look for smoke and read until it's time to go to sleep. I was stationed in a tower in one of the national parks here in the Up. I was installed here in mid-May to prepare for the fire season. There usually isn't the risk of a wildfire in these parts, but since the past couple years were unusually dry, they were cracking down on unsanctioned campfires. The first few weeks were uneventful. Just a couple campfires that needed checking on. I put out a couple that had been left smoldering by the campers who had already packed up and left. The protocol for properly disposing of a campfire go: drown the fire/coals in water. Once the fire/coals were sufficiently drenched, place an X over the pit with sticks or logs. Although this is fairly simple, you'd be surprised at just how many people forget one or both of these steps. May came and went without any major hitches. Just a few teens every so often who thought they were slick by stealing their parents' liquor and camping in the woods. It wasn't until June that things began to spiral. The downward descent began with a dream and a call. I was standing in a meadow. Everywhere I turned, there was nothing but a field. I began to run, frantically looking for an exit from the endless serenity. The boundless beauty felt like it was some sort of trap. There was a low rumbling that I felt in my bones. It wasn't something I could hear, but it was an ever-present oppressive presence that triggered my fight or flight response. The rumble morphed into a deep and ancient laugh. The ground beneath me began to shake and ripple like water in a cup during an earthquake. Water began to pool around my ankles. The vegetation in the meadow was drowning and dying under me. The water quickly overcame me. I was trying to swim up, but something was burrowed deep into the spot where my neck met my skull. I tried to pull at it, but my body was encased in some sort of suit. I could only witness what was unfolding before me. I watched as a submarine descended into some sort of chasm. An overwhelming sense of dread befell me. The ocean began to drain. I was back in the meadow, but it had been burnt to a crisp. Before, where there was once a vast field, was now a grand chasm. It was deep, very deep. I couldn't see the bottom. It just went deeper and deeper and deeper. Then the voice called out to me. The voice, "Draweth near to me, boy. Free me from mine chains." When I awoke, there was frantic shouting coming from the ham radio. I didn't understand what they were saying at first, but when I finally came to, I realized that my boss was screaming about a fire that was raging about a mile away, and that the water scooper was already on the scene. She informed me that even though the fire was under control, I should get as far away as I could as fast as I could. In my sleepy state, I managed to make my way to a lake that was near me. I untied the little flat-bottom boat and rowed my way to the middle where I dropped anchor. After a long 6 hours, the fire had been put out. I went back to my tower and turned on the radio. Me. "Hey Cam, the fire is dead. Want me to check it out?" "Cam, not now. We've got some drone footage showing it's dead. Just try and get some rest and check it out in the morning. Glad to hear you're safe." And that's what I did. I was awoken around 10 p.m. The fire was put out at 4 a.m. This would only give me a couple hours of sleep, but after such an eventful night, I was grateful for any Z's I could catch. The next morning I went through my usual routine. The only thing I added to the monotony was checking out the burn site. It was bad. Although the fire had been extinguished rather quickly, the damage was immense. An area that was roughly 864,000 square feet was burnt to a crisp. All the trees, grass, and other foliage were completely wiped clean from the landscape. It would take decades and decades for nature to regrow this patch. The USFS decided that they would not be planting replacement foliage, but rather that nature knows best how to heal its injuries. While I was sifting through the ashes, I noticed a small schism. A boulder was now exposed, and a cleft underneath its lip was now visible. It was narrow, but even a hefty black bear could crush itself into it if it really wanted to. I consulted my map to see if this crevice was marked. It was not. I drew out my flashlight to take a look inside. I was curious to see if any pitiful animals crawled in for sanctuary. What my maglight illuminated was a beautiful cavern. Excitedly, I retreated to my tower to report my discovery to Cam. "Me, Cam? Cam? Cam, come in." "Cam, what? Can't this wait? I'm in the middle of a debrief with the firefighters." "Me, no it can't. You're gonna want to come see this. I found something incredible." It took until the next morning for Cam to come see me and my discovery. She was tied up with meetings and explanations and media statements. Although I wasn't a fan of her when I met her, it was an absolute joy to see a familiar face after so long. "Cam, this better be life-changing, Bert." "Me, trust me it is." The hike took us around 45 minutes. On the way, I told her all about what the fire uncovered. I told her of the majesty of the cavern, how this could rival the Mammoth Cave system, how we could probably generate some serious revenue if we started selling tickets to tour the cave. But when we got to the boulder, the breach in the earth was gone. "Me, this can't be possible. It was here yesterday." "Cam, Bert, Did you really just drag me from my post through the forest, have me tramp through all this lung-damaging ash, just to show me some stupid boulder? Me. It was here. I saw it. The dirt must have settled or something. Here, help me dig. Cam. No, Bert. I'm leaving. And with that, she left. The last familiar face I'd probably see for the rest of the season. I was confused, angry. I frantically began to dig. Surely I hadn't made it up, but even I was beginning to doubt. There was nothing, just a boulder and a hole dug by an unbalanced and disturbed man. I went back to my tower. I'd been digging for so long that the entire day had washed away. I was tired. After going through my nightly procedure, I glided off into sleep. I began to dream of the cavern, of the beauty of this lonesome grotto, all of the stalagmites and stalactites glittering in the beam of my light. All of the heavenly speleothems casting shadows made the cave feel alive and ancient. The rhythmic dripping of water echoing, penetrating into my ears, was both soothing and terrifying. The gentle echo became a monstrous roar. I felt the earth shake. The gap that allowed me into this sacred chamber closed up behind me, and I heard it. The voice, draw near to me. When I awoke, I found myself saturated in a combination of my own sweat and rain water. During the night, an unpredicted storm blew into my area. The skylight above my bed, that I'd insisted needed recaulking for weeks now, began to leak like a sieve. Thunder, lightning, and winds buffeted the world around me. I tried to radio cam, but all I heard back was silence with intermittent static and screeching. With every flash of lightning, faces illuminated the windows of my tower. Horribly gray and sunken faces stared back at me. They were speaking, but I couldn't comprehend what they were trying to tell me through the terrible tempest. Their gaunt faces were full of what I thought was anger, but I began to realize with each flash of lightning that it was terror. They were pleading with me, slamming their ethereal fists upon the glass. With each blow of their fists, the wind threatened to shatter the windows. My radio began to crackle and hiss. Voices began to make their way through the speaker. Words like run, hide, and save yourself hissed their way through the wheezing radio. I turned back to the door to ensure that it was latched and locked properly when I saw him. A face that seemed so familiar to me. It was Easton, the fire watcher who was stationed here before me. Then he spoke. Easton, you sleep where we slept. Do not creep where we crept. Me? What do you mean? What are you talking about? Easton, you sleep where we slept. Do not creep where we crept. Me? I heard you the first time. Just tell me, please. Easton, you sleep where we slept. Do not creep where we crept. With the last streak of lightning, they all vanished. The wind and the rain slowly turned into a drizzle and then finally stopped. I wasn't entirely sure what Easton meant, but I had a suspicion that it had something to do with the chasm. For 7 weeks I ignored the chasm. I fought every urge to go seeking for its beauty. I successfully resisted the chasm's call until last night. I was having another dream. I was walking through the woods following someone. A woman. Her beautiful hair cascaded down her shoulders as an auburn waterfall. She was adorned in a pulley nightgown. The woman was carrying something in her arms, but I was unable to identify what the cargo was. She whispered for me to follow. Every so often she would turn around a bend, and I'd lose her, but I would always find her in the distance with her back turned to me and giggling. I continued to follow her until I found myself standing at the crevice to the grotto. I watched her as she slowly turned to face me. It was my wife Claire, just as beautiful as the day I lost her. She was holding Jack, just as small as when that drunk took him from me. Claire, come to us. We're in the grotto. Come stay with us. I went to embrace them, but I snapped awake. I was standing in my t-shirt and gym shorts that I slept in. I wasn't in my tower. I was standing at the boulder. Where there was once no crevice, there was one again. A gentle orange glow emanated from within. As though there were an immense magnet and I was a paper clip, I was drawn in. On my hands and knees I squeezed myself through the gateway. It was just as grand as I remembered from my peek in. Like a cathedral formed and fashioned by Mother Nature herself. From where I stood, I couldn't see the back. So I began to trek forward. Whispers and echoes called to me. The voice, draw near to me. The cathedral began to narrow. No more were there stalagmites and stalactites. Just a barren and ever-warming tunnel. The glow increased in intensity slowly and methodically. It was pulsating like a gargantuan heartbeat. I stumbled on what I supposed was loose gravel, but upon further investigation were bones. Bones of those who came before me. I saw them. I saw the faces of previous fire watchers. Faces that were once only photographs to me, but were now real and haggard. Easton spoke to me. Easton, you creep where we crept. You shall sleep where we sleep. I pushed past him. The forces that drew me were stronger than my fear. The tunnel narrowed again. I had to crawl the rest of the way. My hands and my knees scraped and peeled against the stone floor. My wet and viscous blood tried to plead with me to turn back before it was too late. I pressed on through the pain for what felt like an eternity and an instant at the same time. The glow had become a great light. When I came to the mouth of the tunnel, I found another chamber. If the first was a cathedral, this one was a palace. It was brimming with greenery, plants that I'd never seen before, for immense waterfalls were bursting through the walls of this grand chasm. There was an enormous, intimidating, and ineffable orange light down in the bottom. It was pulsating and writhing. It coagulated into a solid form. What appeared to me as a massive cross between an eyeless elephant, giraffe, blue whale, and a mountainous moose. Its incomprehensible form was always shifting and morphing, so that I couldn't make out just what it looked like. Then it spoke to me. The beast. What dost thou want of me? Ask and I shall tell thee. Me. Where's my family? The beast. They were not but an illusion used to callous thee. Me. What are you? The beast. I have been known by many titles. Kachatuashku, Yakuyak, Wakwawi, Mokumbembi, Bahamut, Kiyutha, but thou may call me as Behemoth. I am the second oldest and most fearsome creation of God, one of those that hath been long forgotten. Me, what do you want? Behemoth, I want to destroy. I want to decimate. I want to devastate. I want to combat my oldest enemy. I want to bringeth an end to Leviathan. Me, why are all the others you called dead? Behemoth, they were unfit for service of me. Me, why me? Why did you call to me? Behemoth, to be my emissary. Me, will I see Claire and Jack again? Behemoth, no my child, they are no more. I have nothing left in this world. It has done nothing but take and take from me. The end is nigh, not just for me but for you as well. Do not fight, do not rebel. Behemoth is coming. He shall free us from this world. Embrace his freedom. Embrace the end. It started about a month ago. Around 7 p.m. in the evening I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting any visitors, so I was slightly confused. I don't think I have ever gotten an unexpected visitor before then. I just don't really talk to any neighbors, and I live alone, so it wasn't like a roommate who had forgotten their keys or anything. Either way, I went over to the door and looked out of the peephole, where an officer stood looking very uncomfortable, which only added to my confusion. My first thought was that there had been a car crash or something like that, and they wanted to see if I had a Ring camera or something, so I opened the door. Can I help you, officer? The man stared at me for a moment before clearing his throat and nodded. Yes, I am sorry to inform you, ma'am, but... He took a long pause, an uncomfortably long pause where I just stood there staring at him. I could feel my palms starting to sweat. It was clear from the man's face that something was deeply wrong, and now all of a sudden a million thoughts ran trough my mind at what kind of scenarios could have happened. Your husband was hit by a drunk driver and declared dead at 6 p.m. tonight, ma'am. I am sorry for your loss. I stood there in silence for a long moment as I stared at him, brow furrowed lightly as my thoughts came to a screeching halt, trying to make sense of the sentence before simply shaking my head slowly. I'm sorry, officer, but you must have the wrong house. I am not married. The man simply nodded, the sad expression on his face not changing. All right, well, his body is currently at Westfield Hospital. I wish you a good evening, ma'am. And before I had a chance to correct him, he turned around and walked off. I stared for a moment before yelling out to him, "Please try and find the actual house. Someone is waiting for their husband." But he fully ignored me, simply getting into his car and driving off. I honestly don't know how long I stood in the doorway. I was dumbfounded. Maybe the old owner of my house still had it on his ID card or something. I honestly had no idea what to make of the whole situation. I thought for a moment I should call down to the station, but what would I even say? I am not the widow. No, the man, whoever he was, would surely be declared missing soon, right? And then it would all be solved there. Either way, it left a really bitter taste in my mouth. Knowing that someone had lost their beloved only about an hour ago put a damper on the whole evening. It's one of those things you don't really think about, but it does technically happen every day. Either way, I decided to go to bed early that night and hopefully forget about it in the morning. I wasn't exactly that lucky, but work and pizza for dinner made it feel a lot better, and by the end of the next day it was mostly out of my mind. till around 7 p.m. when I got a knock on the door again, the thoughts flooding back instantly, and with a grunt of irritation, I stood up to see whoever had brought that sort of thing to the forefront of my mind. Looking out the peephole, I saw an officer, a different one this time. I let out a soft sigh of relief, thinking that this had to be someone coming to apologize for the mix-up on behalf of the department. So with a friendly smile, I opened the door up. "Evening, officer." The man didn't even look at me. He was quite a bit taller than B with sunglasses on. He didn't stare at me. He stared straight ahead, as if he didn't want to look at me. So much for a formal apology. It was better than anything, at least. "Evening, miss. I regret to inform you that we have found your son washed up on the shore earlier today. I am sorry for your loss." I stared at him in bewilderment for about 10 seconds. It was strange. I could practically see his body language and face features shift during the silence. The stoic straight posture and face practically crumbling, as if he wasn't ready for silence like that, as if he didn't want to be the one to do this. "What?" finally came out of my mouth, and he simply nodded, as if I was saying it out of unbelieved sorrow rather than confusion. "I am truly sorry, ma'am. He is currently being held in Tia Hospital." And with those words he turned around, walking back to his car where I yelled after him, "I am not a mom," which seemed to make him slump even deeper down, and he sped off quickly. I had no idea how to react. Not only had I never had a kid, but I live in a completely landlocked state. There was no shore within hundreds of miles. I was extremely confused. I could understand this type of mistake happening once, but twice. It felt impossible, so I called up my local police station. The support number, of course. I wouldn't want to clog up the emergency line. A woman took the call, and I politely gave my name, and said that I had now had 2 instances of police officers telling me the deaths of people not associated with me. Then the woman on the other side said, "I am so sorry to hear about your loss, miss, but please, these accidents happen. Would you like for me to give you the number to a grief counselor?" I tried again, explaining to the woman that no, I am not grieving. I haven't lost anyone, and someone out there might never know their lost son has been found if this doesn't get fixed. Once more the woman simply said she understood I was having a hard time, but she had to take police work-related calls, and that she would be happy to give me a therapist's or counselor's number if I needed it. I declined again, and she simply hung up the call. I was baffled, so I took the next step. I decided to look up the hospital that was currently in possession of the missing child, and see if they could give the important information to the right people. Looking up the hospital, I found out that it was 4 states away. Made sense, it had to be by the shore, but why would they think I was the person in need of contact then? Either way, I got the hospital's phone number and called. After waiting in line for a few minutes, I got troughed to the support line and explained my situation again, giving him, of course, my full name. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am, but I think you need to get a hold of funeral arrangements for the body." I honestly didn't know what to say. I simply hung up the call in bewilderment. Why did no one believe me? It's been almost a month at this point. So far I have lost 12 husbands, 2 wives, 7 sons, and 9 daughters. I have no idea what to do. I have tried not answering the door, but then they just arrive an hour later or simply wait. One time I got home late from work to see an officer standing in my driveway. I have no idea what I am supposed to do. It is laying a layer of sadness over every single day. The officer is never the same person. The circumstances are always different. Please, if anyone knows what can be done, I would love to hear it. "You're sure this thing is for me?" I asked, studying the smooth red statue that had just been handed over. The young man on my doorstep narrowed his eyes and clenched his jaw, clearly irritated that I wasn't putting an end to this transaction as fast as humanly possible. My question wasn't rhetorical, however, so I met his gaze and waited for an answer. I wasn't about to be pushed around by a kid who probably still needed to borrow his older brother's ID to buy cigarettes. Eventually, the boy released a cartoonishly exaggerated sigh from his lips, conceding to human decency. He looked down at the clipboard, flicking his neck to move a tuft of auburn-colored bangs out of his eyes to better see the paperwork. "Well, is your dad?" He paused, flipping through the packet of papers, the edges becoming stained a faint yellow-orange from some unidentified flavored dust that lingered on his fingertips. I suppressed the gag and continued to smile weakly at the boy, who was appearing younger and younger by the second. "Adrian Redacted?" "Yes, that's my father's name, but I haven't spoken to him in nearly 20 years. He chuckled and flipped the paperwork back to the front sheet. "Well, consider this a family reunion then, lady. 'Cause you're holding him." Truthfully, I was a little flabbergasted. Adrian and I had been estranged for 2 decades. No awkward phone call at Thanksgiving. No birthday card arriving in the mail 3 weeks late. Complete and total radio silence starting the moment I left my hometown for greener pastures. He hadn't even bothered to reach out after the birth of my only son 5 years ago. I'm fairly confident he was aware of Davy's birth, too. My deadbeat sister still kept up with him, and she knew about my son. So, as I further inspected the strange effigy, I found myself asking, why weren't Dad's ashes bequeathed to Victoria instead? Sure, she only used him for his money. To my sister, Adrian was a piggy bank with a heartbeat that she shared some genetics with. But at least she actually talked to the man. The decision to have this mailed to me upon his demise was inherently perplexing. I rolled the idol in my palm, feeling the wax drag over my skin. There was a subtle heat radiating from the object, akin to the warmth of holding a lit candle. But this thing sure wasn't a candle, I reflected. It was an urn. The acne-ridden burlap sack of hormones that had been coating my property with Cheetos residue, like soot after the eruption of Pompeii, banged a pen against the clipboard. Lady, can you and Pop catch up later? You know, like, when I'm not here. I wanted nothing more than to knock the teeth out of his shit-eating grin. But I could hear Davy behind me, tapping the tip of an umbrella against the screen door, giggling and trying to get my attention. As a single parent, I was his only role model. Punching the lights out of a teenager, I contemplated, probably wouldn't be a great behavior to model. With a calculated sluggishness, I picked up the pen and produced my signature on the paperwork. I took my sweet time, much to his chagrin. As soon as I dotted the last I, the kid ripped the clipboard from me and turned away, stomping off to his beat-up sedan parked on the curb. Wash your hands, champ, I shouted after him. Once he had sped away, the car's sputtering engine finally fading into nothingness, I basked in the quiet of the early evening. Chirping insects, a whistling breeze, and little else. The perpetual lullaby of sleepy suburbia. That silence made what Davy said next exceptionally odd. Ah, Mommy, it's too loud. It's really too loud, he proclaimed, dropping the umbrella to the floor, pacing away from the screen door with his hands cupped over his ears. I spun around, red effigy still radiating warmth in my palm, listening intently, searching for the noise my son was complaining about. But there was nothing. The shrill chiming of our landline greeted me as I walked into the house, screen door swinging closed behind me. I suppose now is a good time to mention this all occurred in the late 90s, i.e. no cell phones. At least I didn't have the money to afford one back then. That must be the noise Davy was upset about, I thought. Logically, though, that didn't make a lick of sense. He'd never objected to the sound of the phone ringing before, not once. I slapped the red effigy onto the kitchen table, rushing to put it down so I could answer the call before it went to voicemail. Hello? Oh, hey Alice. For a second, I was convinced you weren't going to pick up. Since you've been dodging my calls, I mean. My heart sank as Victoria's nasal-toned voice sneered through the receiver. I shut my eyes and leaned my head against the kitchen wall, lamenting the choice to answer this call. I haven't been dodging your calls, sweetheart. Being a single mom is a bit time-consuming, and I don't really have anything new to tell you. I can't repay you overnight. A few months prior, Davy had been hospitalized with pneumonia, and I was between employment, which meant we had no insurance and were paying the medical bills out of pocket. With limited options and against my better judgment, I asked my sister for a loan. Honestly, I would have been better off indebted to the Yakuza. At least when you're unable to pay them, they'll accept a pinky finger as reimbursement, according to movie I watched at least. Okay, sweetheart, that's all well and good, but if you don't pay up soon, Child Welfare Services may get an anonymous call. A concerned citizen worried about Danny's safety in your home. Asterisk. I didn't bother correcting her, for obvious reasons. If she were to ever make good on that threat, Victoria not even knowing my son's name would only bolster my chances at convincing social services that she was a heartless bitch, not a concerned citizen. So instead, I pulled my head from the wall and opened my eyes, about to hang up on her. Right before I placed the phone on the receiver, however, the sight of the red effigy in my peripheral vision captured my attention. I held the phone in the air, hearing distant, static-laden hellos from Victoria as I stared at the object. Despite harboring my father's ashes inside its waxen confines, the figure sort of resembled a woman. It was hard to know for certain. Although it had the frame of a human being, the idol was mostly featureless. Sleek and burgundy, like red wine frozen into the shape of a person. No face, no hair, no clothes. That said, its wide hips and narrow shoulders gave it a feminine appearance. Hands clasped together in a prayer-like gesture over its chest, almost resembling a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Gazing at it so intensely eventually caused a massive shiver to explode down the length of my spine, clunky but forceful like a rock slide. In spite of that sensation, I was transfixed. I creeped over to the idol, on my tiptoes as if I didn't want it to hear me approach, phone still in hand. It was remained inexplicably hot to the touch as I picked it up. For a moment, I regretted signing for the ominous delivery. At the same time, what was I supposed to do? Reject my father's ashes? Even though we were estranged, that just felt wrong. As I better inspected the urn, though, my regret only became more intense. First off, there was no lid or cap to the damn thing. I assumed there would be a cork on the bottom or something, but that surface was just as smooth as the rest of it. So how did the ashes get inside? Not only that, but when I tilted the effigy upside down, desperately searching for where exactly my father's ashes had been inserted into the mold, an unexpected noise caused me to nearly jump out of my skin. It rattled. My father's supposedly cremated remains rattled. Rising fear resulted in me clumsily hurling the thing back down. If I'm remembering correctly, I basically lobbed it at the table like a softball pitch. Despite that, it didn't roll across the surface. It didn't break into a few pieces or tumble onto the floor. In a singular motion, it landed perfectly upright. Somehow, the base of the effigy stuck to the table like it had been magnetized to its exterior. I slowly lifted the phone back to my ear. "You still there, Vic?" I asked, whispering. "Yeah, Jesus, I'm still here. Where'd you go?" I was totally kidding before Alice, you know that. I do really need that money though, made some bad gambles recently. Cutting her off before the inevitable tangent, I whispered another question. "Have you talked to Dad recently?" The line went dead. I listened to the thumping of Davy moving around in his room directly above me as I waited for a reply. Eventually she responded, her tone laced with the faintest echoes of fear. "Maybe like a year ago. Nothing since then." "Why? You never ask about Dad. You finally reach out to him or something?" Briefly, I considered answering, explaining in no uncertain terms the uncanniness of the urn that was now haunting my kitchen table. But somehow I knew I shouldn't. To this day, I can't decipher the reasoning behind my intuition. Call it an extrasensory premonition or the gut instincts of a mother, but I held my tongue. That decision likely saved mine and my son's life. I hung up without another word. It begun to ring again immediately, but ignored it. Ignored it a second and a third time, too. I stood motionless in front of the landline, waiting for Victoria to give up. After the fifth unanswered call, the room finally went silent. Once a minute had passed without another ring, I felt confident that she was done extorting me. For the time being, at least. Shaking off my nervous energy with a few shoulder twists, I walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway until I reached the stairs, and shouted up to Davy. "Honey, come down and help me with dinner." I heard my son erupt from his bedroom, slamming the door behind him, sneakers tapping against the floorboards as ran. When he came into view, grinning excitedly, I painted a very artificial smile on my face, masking my smoldering apprehension for his benefit. Before his foot even touched the first stair, however, his grin evaporated, replaced by a deep frown alongside a shimmer of profound worry behind his eyes. Once again, he cupped his hands over his ears and screamed down to me. "Mom, it's still too loud. The man is laughing and dancing so loud. Can you please tell him to stop?" The curves of my artificial smile began to falter and fade, despite my attempt to maintain the facade of normality. Other than my son's deafening words, the house was completely silent, devoid of any and all sound, and there was only one thing that was different. In another example of unexplainable intuition, I marched into the kitchen, picked up the effigy plus the certificate that it came with, and walked down into the cellar. Ignoring the eerie heat simmering in my palm, I made my way to the darkest corner of the unfinished basement and placed my father's rattling ashes behind a stack of winter coats. By the time I returned to the kitchen, Davy was already there, rummaging through the pantry. "All better, lovebug?" He paused his scavenging for a second, perking his ears. "Pretty much. I can still hear him giggling, but it doesn't hurt my head. Can we have spaghetti for dinner?" That was the worst of it for a few months. Without Davy complaining about the volume of the laughing/dancing man, I forgot about the effigy. Make all the comments you want about my lack of supernatural vigilance. Call me a moron. Or brain dead. It's okay. I've called myself all those things and much, much more, 1,000 times over since these events. I was a single mom working 2 jobs, protecting and raising my kid the best I knew how. Credit where credit is due, though. I caught on before it was too late. It started with the ants. In the weeks prior to the delivery of the red effigy, our home had become overrun with tiny black invaders, and I couldn't afford to hire an exterminator. Instead, I settled for the much cheaper option, ant traps. At first, I thought I was wasting my money. They didn't seem to be making a dent in the infestation. Then, out of nowhere, the ants disappeared without a trace. Some kind of noiseless extinction event apparently took place without me noticing. Maybe the traps did work. Just took some time, I thought. Then one night, I was bending over at the fridge, selecting a midnight snack. As I grabbed some leftovers, the dim, phosphorescent glow coming from the appliance highlighted subtle movement by the cellar door. I stood up and squinted at the movement, but I couldn't tell what the hell it was. Honestly, it looked some invisible person was drawing a straight line in pencil between the backyard door and the entrance to the basement, obsidian graphite dragging against the tile floor. I rubbed sleep from my eyes, but the bizarre phenomena didn't change. When I flicked the kitchen light on, I better understood what was happening, but I had no clue why it was happening. A steady stream of black ants were silently making their way into the cellar. More irritated than frightened in that moment, I traced their cryptic migration down the creaky stairs, assuming they had been attracted to some food Davy absent-mindedly left down there. But when I saw that the procession of living dots were heading for the area behind the winter coats, the irritation spilled from my pores with the sweat that was starting to drench my t-shirt, and then fear was the only emotion left inside me. I hadn't thought about the red effigy in some time. As I peeked behind the stack of fleeces and windbreakers, I almost didn't recognize it. It had tripled in size. The figure wasn't praying anymore either. Now it was lying in the fetal position, knees tucked to its chest, head resting on the ground. Ants entered the wax, but they didn't come out. One by one, they gave their bodies to the red effigy. As my horror hit a fever pitch, vibrating in my chest like a suffocating hummingbird, I could have sworn the idol tilted its smooth, featureless face to glare at me. I swung around and bolted up the stairs. Didn't sleep much that night. Not a wink after what I witnessed in the cellar. I paced manic laps around the first floor of my home all through the night, desperately trying to process the encounter. As the sun rose, however, I hadn't figured much out. I wasn't convinced what I saw was real. If it was real, God forbid, I had no fucking idea what to do about it. Exhausted to where I became fearless and dumb, I plodded the stairs, snow shovel in hand, determined to throw my father's supposedly incinerated corpse into the garbage. The morning light pouring in through a dusty window near the ceiling made the process exponentially less terrifying, at least at first. When I reached the idol, I came to the gut-wrenching conclusion that I hadn't hallucinated its transformation. It was still the size of a toddler. I didn't dwell on the unexplainable. That would have paralyzed me to the point of catatonia. Instead, I focused my attention solely on getting that red curse out of my fucking house. I arced back with the shovel and slid it under the wax. Briefly, I stopped, readying myself to sprint out of the cellar at breakneck speed if the effigy came to life in response to my intrusion. It remained inanimate, and I cautiously placed my hands back on the handle, attempting to lift the wax idol. Attempting and failing to lift it. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much energy I put into the action, it wouldn't budge. I couldn't move it an inch. Dumbfounded, I let the shovel clatter to the floor, and left the cellar to get Davy ready for school. Locked the door behind me just in case. Over the next week, I enlisted 3 separate men, each of them strapping and Herculean in their own right, to help me try to move the blossoming urn. Instructed them not to touch it, another baseless intuition that turned out to be correct when it was put to the test. My ex-boyfriend couldn't lift it with the shovel, and he was able to bench press 400 pounds. My plumber, a person I'd been friendly with for years, couldn't lift it either. When he tried to push the idol as opposed to lifting it with the shovel, the grizzled man screamed bloody murder, having sustained third-degree burns on the inside of both hands from the attempt. Today is my birthday, and I received something in the mail. The return address is our old home. With trembling hands, I peeled the letter open and removed the card that was inside. Here's what the message said. Dear Alice, I apologize about not reaching out all these years. Truthfully, I imagined you'd still be angry at me and Granddad. But I'm hoping you'll get this card and let bygones by bygones. I want you to know that Victoria was my first choice for the urn. However, at the time, she owed me a great deal of money. To avoid payment, your sister convinced me she was in prison, which made her an unsuitable choice for what I would expect are obvious reasons after what happened to your fingers. In the end, however, I suppose it all worked out as it was meant to. Please call XXXXXXXX. I look forward to 4 of us spending time together. Love, Dad. Attached, there's a Polaroid of my father and another man standing next to him. Dad looks exactly as I remember him when I left home, and that was almost half a century ago. And the other man looks a lot like him. Davy is away at college. He hasn't answered my calls for the last 2 days. Once I post this, I suppose I'll call my father. Wish me luck. No one liked Michael from accounting. And I mean no one. People wouldn't go out of their way to be a jerk to him. But he didn't have any real office buddies either. He just gave off this air about him, like he thought he was better than everyone else, but he didn't have any reason to think that. So all he could do was stew and pick apart people's every move in some egotistical attempt to undermine them. Yeah, he's that type of guy. I was always careful to stay out of his way. The dude reeked of BO, and he always glowered at me as I walked past his desk. I tried saying hi to him once. No cigar. He just glared at me even harder until I got uncomfortable and left. All that to say, I wouldn't exactly go above and beyond to interact with Michael, but I was never a dick to him either. But unfortunately for me, that's not how he took it when I started talking to Kara. The first time I noticed, it was at the office Christmas party. Don't look now, but Michael is staring daggers at you, Kara said, raising her cup to her lips. I didn't listen. I immediately turned and looked. Kara was right. Michael was standing alone in the corner, brooding. He had his arms crossed, one foot against the wall, and he was glaring directly at me. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Hey, yeah, that's not creepy at all, I said, sweat beading atop my brow. Kara awkwardly giggled in response. The tension in the air was thicker than butter. I think I'm going to say something to him, I muttered, breaking the silence. Kara's eyes grew wide. Dom, I don't think that's such a good idea. Michael's a weirdo. We should probably just ignore him. I sighed. She was right. Confronting Michael would only stir the pot. But even so, I felt like I needed to speak up. If he had a grudge against me, I wanted to know. It'll only take a second. Don't worry, I'm not going to provoke him. I'm just going to ask him to stop staring. I could see the worry behind Kara's eyes dissipate slightly, but I could tell that she was still concerned. Okay, just be smart about it. I nodded and began walking toward Michael, who remained perched against the wall like a fixture. Even though he knew that I was approaching him, he didn't avert his gaze. In fact, I think he started scowling at me harder. Hey Mike, I said, trying to choose words carefully. Just want to make sure everything's cool between us. Kara thought you were staring at her or something, but she's probably just overreached dash. Stay away from her. My mouth fell open. The way he'd said it caught me off guard. His demand was laced with a deep hatred, venom seeping through his clenched teeth. Excuse me? Michael's burning eyes locked with mine, and for a moment, I felt small, weak, like I was completely at his mercy. You heard me. Stay away from Kara. If you don't, I am going to unleash a hell the likes of which you can never even begin to grasp. I shook my head as a deep-seated rage bubbled within me. Look man, I was trying to be nice about this, but you're taking it too far. Who are you to tell me who I can and can't talk to? Kara and I both think you're a creep. Leave us alone. Fine, Michael said, folding his arms across his chest and leaning back against the wall. You leave me no choice. Whatever, dude. Bye. And with that, I walked back to Kara, leaving Michael posing like the wannabe anime villain that he surely thought he was. It goes without saying that the rest of the Christmas party had been ruined. Michael kept staring, and even though I doubted he would actually do anything, his threat lingered at the back of my mind like a plague. As it turned out, I was right to worry. Weeks passed, and Kara and I grew closer by the day. I hadn't heard so much as a peep from Michael, just more wrathful glares whenever I passed by his cubicle. Things had been going smoothly. I'd finally met a girl who liked me, and my life had never been better. I finally felt like I was truly happy, until I had another run-in with Michael. Dominic. A nasally voice called my name as I was packing up to leave for the weekend. I mentally rolled my eyes. I didn't even have to glance up to know who it was. Hey Mike, I said, pursing my lips and continuing to gather my belongings. Michael wore a shit-eating grin. I didn't know why he was smiling at me, but I didn't like it. This is your final warning, Dominic. Leave Kara alone, or the fun will begin, Michael said, his chapped lips splitting apart to reveal rows of jagged teeth that looked as if they hadn't seen a toothbrush since 2014. Screw off, dude. I already told you that's not happening. I was hoping you'd say that, he replied, rubbing his hands together like a cartoonish antagonist. I cringed. Hard. I am going to make you suffer, he said, beginning to cackle. And I am going to HR. Seriously, get a life. Michael scoffed, pushed his glasses further up his hooked nose, and slunk away without so much as another word. I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that my threat had worked. Little did I know, I had only poked the bear. That evening, my mother went missing. Dad could have sworn that she was upstairs in the bath, humming a soft tune to herself, when it just stopped. After 30 minutes of complete silence, he'd gone to check on her, only to realize that she was gone. I couldn't believe the news. Mom wasn't the kind to just run off without telling anyone, and surely Dad would have noticed her walking out the door. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could someone be there 1 minute, then disappear into thin air the next? I called off from work the next week to comfort Dad and help him search. I was taking it hard, but he was nearly inconsolable. The police were no help. In fact, I think they suspected that we had something to do with it. The whole thing made me sick to my stomach. I just wanted Mom to come home safely. By the time I returned to work, I felt like a shell of my former self. Kara tried her best to reassure me that everything would be fine, but what could she really do? The only thing that could take my pain away was for my mother to be found alive and well. That's why the note that appeared on my desk after I got back from lunch immediately caught my attention. I know where your mother is. Meet me behind the dumpster at 4:15 sharp. My mind raced with possibilities. Who had written this? Did they really know where Mom was, or was it all some disgusting prank? Whatever the case, I had to get to the bottom of it. My heart nearly exploded with anticipation as I rounded the corner. The dumpster was at the far end of the parking lot. It was surrounded by a large wooden fence, which offered the most inconspicuous spot for shady activity. I should have guessed who I'd find waiting for me. Michael. I think a part of me knew that I'd find him there, leaning against the wall, trying to act cool and mysterious. But still, something about seeing him there of all people twisted my stomach into knots. My sworn enemy was the last person I wanted to talk to at that moment. Why, hello Dominic, Michael said, grinning at me with those dirty yellowed teeth. WH, what are you doing here? I croaked, my head starting to spin. Weren't expecting to find me here, were you? Yes, I can see why you would be confused, he said, hands behind his back as he began to saunter over to me. I realized that I may not look intimidating to a mere dash. Save me the monologue. Where's Mom? I spat through clenched teeth. He was acting like this was all some messed up game. A trivial punishment for crossing him. Something about his behavior ignited a fire in me, and Michael noticed. Feeling a bit feisty now, are we? Well, all will come to light, just you wait. I know what happened to your mother, Dominic. Cease your relations with Kara, and I might consider dash. Slam. In a bout of rage, I shoved Michael hard against the wooden fence. Are you fucking kidding me? All this just because you're jealous of me and Kara? Give me back my mother, or I swear, I'll knock out every tooth in your deformed skull and force each of them down your throat one by one. I raised a fist and watched as Michael cowered down like the worm he was. Okay, fine. Here's the coordinates, he said, wincing as I lowered my hand. He scurried away the moment I took my eyes off him, scuttling into the driver's seat of an idling Honda Civic that I'd somehow missed entirely. Michael didn't even bother shouting an insult. The only thing I heard as I stood there, staring in shock at the crumpled piece of paper in my hand, was the screeching of tires as he peeled away. I obviously raced to the coordinates the second that I snapped out of it. I didn't know what I would find when I arrived, but it definitely wasn't what was waiting for me. The warehouse was about a 20-minute drive away. The sun still hadn't set when I got there, but it was low enough to splash the sky with an intoxicating pink tint. That scene stuck out in my mind as I pulled into the empty lot. Once I parked, I took a deep breath, steeled my resolve, and stepped outside. I walked up to the weather-beaten, rusted building and prepared for the worst. Michael had given me a way to find my mother. He never guaranteed me that she was alive. I slid open the door, heart in my throat. My eyes grew wide, and my vision grew hazy when I drank in the scene before me. Mom wasn't there. No one was. The warehouse was completely empty, save for a single lawn chair sitting in the center of the room. A flood of emotions surged through me. Rage, betrayal, defeat. They all coalesced within me like a nauseating cocktail. Had Michael really gone through the trouble of finding the perfect place to hide someone just to lead me on a wild goose chase? I was fuming, ready to track the slimy weasel down and beat him into next week, when a thought flashed across my mind. The chair. Why would someone leave a single lawn chair in the middle of a seemingly abandoned warehouse? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Fueled by curiosity, I tentatively approached it, illuminated solely by the sliver of light seeping in through the partially opened door. Once I was standing directly above it, I noticed a piece of paper lying face down on the chair's surface. When I flipped it over, I nearly passed out right then and there. "Have you heard from your father lately?" All the color drained from my face. That bastard. He couldn't have. I immediately pulled out my phone and tried calling Dad's number as I sprinted to my car. No dice. The phone just kept ringing and ringing until it went to voicemail. I flew out of that parking lot like a bat out of hell. I raced down highways and main roads going well above the legal limit, fortunate enough to have avoided any run-ins with the cops. Once I skidded to a halt in front of my parents' house, I slammed the car into park and leapt out, praying that I would burst through that door to find my father where he always was at that time of day, sitting in his favorite armchair, reading a novel before dinner. But that's not what I found. I shoved the door open, and I was greeted by an empty house. All the lights were off, and by that point, I was starting to feel nauseous. I just knew that Michael had taken my father from me too. "Dad," I called out, my voice quaking as tears welled in my eyes. I knew it was futile, but I had to try. A deep pit began to form in my chest when I was met with nothing but silence. I loved my parents dearly, and I'd be completely lost without them there to guide me. Click. I was suddenly ripped from my train of thought by the sound of the lamp by the sofa flicking on. It bathed the room in light, illuminating my worst nightmare. Michael was sitting on my parents' couch. The smug grin plastered on his face sent a chill creeping down my spine. "You, what did you do to my parents?" I growled, glaring at Michael with a hatred stronger than I'd ever felt towards anyone. "Who? Your parents? Oh, you mean Steve and Linda. Quite pleasant people, if I do dash." "Stop with the games," I seethed, taking a couple of aggressive steps toward him. "Ah, not so fast," Michael said, opening the lid of a laptop that had been lying beside him. "Take one more step, and you'll meet the same fate as your parents." I paused, wary of his threat. My voice quivered as I struggled to form a coherent sentence. "And what fate is that?" Michael's grin widened just a little. What he said next chilled me to my core. "Your parents were deleted, Dominic. Wiped from existence by a program of my creation." My eyes grew wide. That wasn't possible. He had to be lying. "You see, I had a recent breakthrough, Dominic. A discovery that fundamentally disproves science as we know it. Through a variety of tests and a bit of luck, I have discovered that all matter is made up of binary code. It's not visible, but it's there. And it makes up all of us. Everything. All matter, living or dead. I've developed a program that can take an object's specific line of code and poof. Delete it. Gone. Like it never existed in the first place. All I could do was stare. If what Michael was saying was true, then had he? That's impossible. I don't believe you. Tell me where my parents are, you freak. What he was saying couldn't be true. That monster had kidnapped Mom and Dad, and I was determined to find them. "I thought you might say that," Michael grinned, turning his attention to the laptop. "Well, what are you doing?" His fingers flurried across the keys. I didn't even have a chance to react before he smirked at me maliciously. "You're about to find out." Michael pressed the enter key, and I suddenly crashed to the floor. I was dazed, but once I recovered, I tried to scramble back to my feet. But I couldn't. I glanced down, dread pumping through my veins like venom. I felt all the color drain from my face, and I immediately understood why I couldn't stand back up. My left leg was missing. Not hidden from view. Not invisible. It was just gone. "Why? Why are you doing this to me?" I croaked, still shocked by the sight of my missing appendage. Michael scoffed. "I told you to leave Kara alone. You didn't do that, so now I'm removing you from the picture." I glowered up at him. I had never despised anyone more than the man staring back at me. All this over a girl who doesn't even look in your direction? She'll never go for you. You're fucking delusional. That may be true, but I doubt she'll stick around for a man with no legs either. I looked down again, consumed by fear. Just like Michael had implied, my right leg was missing, and a pool of crimson was blossoming at my pelvis. Michael smirked. He looked giddier than a child on Christmas morning. "This really is a shame, Dominic. I gave you a chance to do better, but you didn't. You had your shot and you blew it. I know that Kara is out of my league, but as the old adage goes, if I can't have her, no one can. That's how I ended up here, bleeding out on my living room floor with this freak show reveling in my suffering. I can't call for help or Michael is going to delete the rest of me, just like he did to my parents. Either way, I'm going to be joining them soon enough. I'm already getting dizzy from the blood loss. I'm sharing this as a warning. Michael thinks no one will believe me, but I swear I'm not lying. I have to get this out so that someone knows. Once I'm gone, there won't be any evidence to tie him to the crime. And I won't be his last victim. Please heed my warning. If you have a coworker who claims to have the ability to erase people from existence, don't blow them off. Because there's a chance that they might be telling the truth. I, 25M, consider myself a nice guy. I treat everyone, especially women, equally and with great respect. Given this, when I saw a woman standing on the side of the road, holding out a thumbs up, I did not hesitate to give her a ride. I know most people view this as a dangerous act, and yes, my town does have a cult problem, but all of the people who have been arrested for murder are tatted up bald men, so I knew I was in the clear. As she approached my car, I tried to determine how attractive she was, not that it mattered, and I determined that in my humble opinion, she was not very attractive, not that it matters. She hopped in the back passenger seat and thanked me for picking her up. Based on her deep voice, I determined she must be a smoker. I've never been a cigarette guy. I prefer vaping because of the flavor. I didn't want my car to smell like cigarette smoke, so I asked her not to smoke in my car, to which she said cigarettes won't be the only thing getting smoked tonight. Based on that response, I figured I was talking to a barbecue enthusiast and decided to make small talk about meat. So, are you a butt or shoulder kind of woman? I asked inquisitively. I love to eat both, she replied. Me too. I find the butt is easier to cut up though, especially when smoked. I actually enjoy carving something up when it's tough, using my knives to cut through flesh and sever tendons. I love imagining the screams, she added. It was then that I realized I had made a mistake. This was a real deal meat expert. I couldn't keep up in the conversation, and I wasn't about to be outsmarted by a woman, not that her gender matters. All this food talk was making my mouth wet with saliva. I was starving. I could eat anything. I decided that a mint would suffice, so I decided to ask. Do you happen to have a mint that I could have? I'm not planning to kiss you, I'm just hungry, I asked. Oh, I suppose I can give you a last meal. I'm not completely sure what she meant by this, but I do have brown hair, so she could be referencing the painting of the Last Supper with Jesus in it and comparing me to him. Due to this, I decided to take this odd remark as a compliment. She dug through her bag and pulled out a small yellow mint with a wrapper that was clear on one side and had what looked like a foil wrap on the other. My stomach grumbled. I was starved. I did hit a deer because I was turned around staring at her while driving, but I have been driving for 8 years, and hitting only one deer in that time is pretty good, so I wasn't upset by it. I decided to focus on the road. That's when I heard her speak up from the back. Take it! I didn't want to look back because I didn't want the deer to try to up the score on me, so I reached back using my rear-view mirror to guide my hand. This did not work well because when I looked in my mirror, I could not find her. After a lot of thrusting and shaking of my hand, she eventually put it in my hand. As soon as it hit my hand flew to my mouth like a flash of lightning. Due to this, I did eat the packaging. I normally don't do this, so I think it's okay that it happened this one time. I was now extremely thankful that my hunger had ended and decided to turn around to shake her hand. When I stuck out my right hand, she followed suit. I did notice that on her wrist, she had a tattoo of a dragon with a sword through its head and a phrase in a language I did not know. I don't really like girls with tattoos, not that my attraction to her matters. After she shook my hand, she did something weird. She pulled on her hair and it slid off her head. I assumed she was wearing a wig because she was now completely bald, and pulling out that much hair would make your average person let out a loud "YOOWWW" out of pain. This is when I realized she probably had cancer. Oh no, you're going to die soon, I exclaimed. I hope so, she replied. Oh, well I guess it's good you've accepted it. A weird grin came across her face. Upon studying this grin, I found that she also had a beard. Not my thing, but that's not relevant. You really shouldn't be picking up random strangers, she said. Well, it's no problem, I replied. Oh, it is. There's a lot of dangerous people in this area, she answered. Yeah, guess it's a good thing you're not one of them, I responded. I hit another deer. I forgot to ask. Where are you heading anyway? Me? I'm heading to hell. But, not before you, she responded. Ma'am, I'm an atheist, I informed her. You'll soon reconsider. Let's not discuss religion, I replied, hoping to end this line of discussion. I decided to focus on the road, so that the deer couldn't further their lead on me. I decided that conversing with her wasn't going great, so I decided to put on some music. The first thing that came on my playlist was Lana Del Rey. I decided to change it because I didn't want her to think I put this on just because she was a woman. That would be patronizing. I hit skip, and the next thing that came on was the hit song Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar. If you don't know who that is, he is an esteemed African-American artist. Based on her being an older white woman, I don't think she could appreciate the culture. I ultimately decided to turn the radio off. "Are you a good singer?" I asked. "Let me out here," she responded. "What? This road is dark. It might not be safe. Please, for the love of God, please just let me out," she pleaded. I did as she asked. I pulled over, and she hopped out without saying anything, and began running down the road. Overall, it was a weird experience, to be honest, and not just because she was a woman. The thing that has left me confused about this incident is how come she did not have a reflection. I guess she could have been contorting her body in a way that she missed my rearview mirror, but I find that unlikely because she seems older and spinal mobility tends to deteriorate with time. Let me know if this was weird or if I'm overreacting. Also, Happy International Women's Day.